this button right here. Red is on.
Good morning, everyone. We're going to begin our Children's Seniors Family Committee meeting of, I was going to say of today, but of our last hearing of the year. And I'm going to begin with asking everybody here to introduce themselves. And if I may begin with you, Ignacio.
Ignacio Guerrero, Director for the Department of Child Support Services.
Bob Minicucci, Director, Social Services Agency.
Geeta Siraj, Assistant County Counsel.
Cindy Chavez, member of the Board of Supervisors.
Dave Cortese, Board of Supervisors.
Jeff Smith, County Executive.
Thank you, everyone. And then if there's anybody here who would like to speak to an item that is not on the agenda but within the purview of this committee under public comment, now would be the time to do so. Seeing none, I'm going to then move on to approval of our consent and changes to the agenda, our consent calendar. So just so everybody knows, often we put things on consent and they're not it's not a knock against any program. It's actually that all of our questions have been answered and we don't feel the need to torture you. Some of you we will torture today. But it's an opportunity for us to say thank you for your good work and thank you for the reports. So let me walk through my recommendation for the consent calendar, and this would be our legislative policies initiative, and I'm going to come back and make one comment about that. The item 5, our Human Rights Commission bylaws. 6, our Human Rights Commission asylum resolution. 7, the Family Friendly Workplace Awards. 8, the Neighborhood Safety Service Unit. 9, the School-Based Mental Health Resources. And I'm going to just make a quick comment about that. Actually, I think maybe, let me see why. I think maybe I'll just keep that off consent, actually. Sorry about that. Item 10, the Project Cornerstone report. Item 11, the PAGC annual report. And item 12, the Older Adult Summit annual report. So that would be 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, and 12. And then item 22, which is our meeting schedule, we're going to adopt that, but I just want to highlight that we're going to have to rework the schedule. We neglected to include our fearless leader from the Department of SSA, so we're going to have to retake a look at that. But I want to adopt it just so we have something in place to get us started at the beginning of the year. And then item 23 is our work plan. So if I can, is there anything else you want to add or take off that I put on?
No, I would just say, as you said, all the reports that you're suggesting move on to consent are good and thorough. And obviously, I have pages of staff notes here on everything that I've gone over. I particularly wanted to, again, thank the team from probation on NSU for continuing that work and continuing to work on some of the difficult challenges there or ambitions there, like facilities. So I just wanted to make that comment, put a little shout out there on that one in particular. As we end the calendar year, it's been a good year for NSU. Other than that, I'm happy to move your recommendations in terms of the consent calendar.
Great. Is there anything that we put on consent that someone thinks we shouldn't, that you just really want to speak to? We're happy to do that. It's not a trick question. You're all looking at me like it is a trick question. Yes, it is. Okay, let me just make a couple of comments. On the Legislative Policies Committee, on the legislative policy work, I want to say how much I appreciate the work being done, and that I am going to ask if you and Dr. Smith and Steve could take a look at how, I'm not even sure I want to say this out loud, but how we do create a legislative policy, a legislative committee without creating a whole separate committee. And what I wanted to recommend to Supervisor Cortese is that we actually make that a standing agenda item under FGOC, because I feel bad for you all trying to make guesses and writing letters and legislative support, and we don't have a committee to review legislation before we have a conversation at the board, and I know that's caused some consternation. So if Dave's open to it, I just wanted to refer to staff to help us figure out how to do that without it being super, super painful. and us not having a whole other committee.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. I've been here long enough that I was on for a couple of years, as I recall, the original legislative committee, and there has been a long-standing gap now in our ability to work through those kinds of issues without having them go directly to the board. Absent discussion or deliberation, the kind of deliberation you get in committee. So I think it's a good idea, and I think as far as making sure that other committees, other committees can do what they want. They have their own chairs and vice chairs, but I think if FGOC is doing that to some degree, we can be thoughtful in terms of asking for some of those items to be dual tracked in the other committees. It's sort of a referral over to the other committee, a soft referral, in that if we say Housing, Land Use, and Transportation should take a look at this, we think, please refer that advice to the chair, then it's up to the chair if they want to take it up or not. But all the while, FGOC can be, continue to track that item. So sort of a courtesy referral to whatever committee we think should be paying attention. Something like that I think would be great, but however else staff wants to advise us to set up the procedure is fine with me.
And maybe it's just a matter, too, of reintroducing the procedure to the board, because Joe had a different understanding of it than I did, and I think that might have to, and we came on at the same time, but I think that might have to do with him opting out of that ledge committee that Ken tried to hornswoggle him into. So, all right. Then on the only other issue I wanted to raise was, let me see. Oh, I took it off consent. Okay, so our consent calendar is 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12, 22, and 23. Can I get a motion with those comments?
So moved.
And a second. So all of you, you're free to run amok if we took your stuff off. The others, you will stay with us a bit longer. We'll go then to item 9, and this is the school-based mental health services. And I pulled this just because I wanted to, since we had heard this at the board already, I did want to highlight an issue, and I realize we don't have appropriate counsel here to address one of the concerns that got raised at the board.
Sure.
Hey, Sherry.
Hi.
So what I wanted to better understand is how we can have a conversation with the schools so that investments we make are investments that we have the ability to track outcomes and, collect especially aggregate data so that we can look at emerging trends and the like. And I was a little surprised. I had not heard a concern from County Council relative to data zone. I know we'll have a deeper discussion about that as appropriate off agenda, but perhaps through council. But I wondered if from an operational perspective, we had concerns about data zone, or if there were other issues that we wanted to also make sure we were raising with schools as we were talking to them about possible expansion of services.
Sure. Sherry Terrell, Director of Children, Youth, and Family System of Care with Behavioral Health, and I'm going to have Catherine Aspiris, our mental health manager, speak to that point related to data zone.
Great.
Okay. So data zone and
Can you turn your mic on?
oh, sorry, yeah, just have to push that.
Does that work? Yeah.
There you go.
So schooling services and Data Zone have been working together to expand Data Zone to have a module where our schooling services coordinators can input data into their system to reduce duplicate data entry. And so 3 school districts started piloting that last year, which was Campbell Union, Franklin McKinley, and Mountain View Wisman. And so we were able to export the data from the Data Zone system to put into our annual reports and quarterly reports. We are working this year. They've expanded the Data Zone module, that SLS module, to allow access for Campbell Union High School, which is just started with SLS this year, and Orchard School District as well. And then we are working with Data Zone just last week, we met with them last week to talk about exporting aggregate data and unaggregated data to look at school attendance and look at course failures for those that are being referred through SLS. And so we'll be getting that data hopefully at the end of this school year to put into Q4 report.
So the question I have is, and what was a little confusing to me, so is that I want to make sure, really following Supervisor Cortesi's lead, that we're building up meaningful partnerships with the schools. And I love that, and I think we need to be in the schools in a more direct way. My interpretation of our work with schools is that in some areas they want services from us, and in other areas we want to work with them to provide services that we think may be of value. So for example, the offices of gender-based violence will be putting out RFPs. I don't know where they are in process to do more work around prevention. Same with public health, where they may want to talk about dating violence or sexual health or any number of things. And in some respects, we're kind of coming at the schools from a lot of different places to offer services. And there are two outcomes that I want to make sure that we have. And one is that that our relationships with the schools it's one whole relationship with the school and not multiple departments sort of getting into the schools and better so that we can coordinate the services we're providing. Right. But the second is that as we're making investments in the schools, and frankly, you know, since 1,000 years ago, since Prop 13, we've all been trying to figure out how to refund our schools, and the county's I think playing a role in providing some services that schools provided when I was, you know, I know this was 100 years ago and there was snow and uphill walking, but where you had like a nurse, a librarian, you know, you had, they had resources that they don't have right now, and we're kind of patching those resources in. So as we were having a discussion about expanding services, the thing I was sort of struck by is that years ago, actually, behavioral health was concerned, and so was the County Office of Education, about us not having everybody communicating through the same system. Right. And so I had wanted to condition our contracts with the schools on them opting into that system, because the thing that I'm most concerned about is that as we're doing all of this work, if we can't clearly track impact, and when budget times come, what we cut are the last programs. We don't cut, and we may be cutting the best programs. We don't if we don't have mechanisms to assess their value. So I wondered, have we, as a county, have we had a discussion about our overall approach and relationships that we want to have with schools? And if so, where is that discussion being had, and then who owns that discussion? And by owns, I mean is really tracking it for us.
Try this again. Good morning. Marita Juarez, I'm the Family and Children Services Division Director. Thank you for bringing up those points. So those are really important. The relationships are pretty key to how we become successful. And I think we have, through the Schooling Services Initiative, that we have really strong relationships. But I do understand where many different programs come to the campuses, and it could be maybe not so streamlined. And so we really, in our relationships with school districts, really support our schooling services coordinators to actually be the point of contact to kind of really coordinate those services for our families and children, and be a key spokesperson in terms of just pretty much the coordination of services, so that it doesn't seem so not coordinated. One of the things is that we also have, as part of our schooling services initiative, is the campus collaboratives, where all the organizations meet on a monthly or sometimes quarterly basis, where they talk about the services that are being provided within the school districts or at specific schools, so that services that people are aware of, all the multitude of services that are being provided to the families and kids in the community. The other piece is that, we have started conversations with the other county departments, such as the Department of Family and Children's Services, in terms of how do we align our outcomes and goals and objectives for our school districts and for our kids. So we recently, I think a couple of months ago, met with Deborah Portia from Social Services, as well as George Montes, to really think about overall, like, how are our departments working together in a cohesive way and coordinated way where our outcomes get aligned. So that's one of the other things I wanted to bring up.
Can I interject something on just very specific to your question, Supervisor Chavez and Cherry, please, or any of you jump in if you want. I just heard Supervisor Chavez specifically asking about leveraging data zone vis-a-vis schooling services negotiations as we're bringing schools on or districts on. And that has been done to some extent. I mean, she was asking, has that been, I think you were asking, has that been institutionalized, or what? Where are we at administratively in terms of holding that as something important to accomplish in the process? And only because there's been many standing meetings between my office and the SLS staff over the years, because we get approached by school districts who are interested in signing on, that over the past, I want to say, year and a half or so, approximately, maybe 2 years, time flies, that shift started to occur where the leadership on the SLS side started sitting down with the school districts and saying, first of all, you need to have some skin in the game in terms of covering cost of the coordinator. We can't pay all of it. And secondly, data zones is a non-negotiable. I mean, the program really just doesn't work unless you're signed on to that in terms of us, the coordinator, being able to access the kind of information that may need to be accessed in terms of existing caseloads. So, I mean, basically the program does two things, everything that was just described. Brings in NGOs that are CBOs that are in the perimeter, even obviously off campus, to any given school, and also governmental services into the bailiwick of one coordinator who should be that person. Let's say you were the coordinator, that on that campus people would say, this student may need either some CBO services or some county services, but we're not sure. Just ask Cindy. And then you being the coordinator would then have not only data zone access to whatever's been entered in on the educational side regarding that student, but also any prior contact that, if it's been entered properly, that the county has had. So if that youngster had a probation officer, not just mental health, that's where I think I'm hoping this discussion goes today, but a probation officer in the past, or was foster. I think 100% of foster have been tagged in data zones, which is really important to us as a county. So that's probably a good example. So you would be able to say, without sharing that information to all the school district employees, you're able to take that family and say, I know exactly where I need to direct you because you're a foster youth, and I know where all the programs are within the county. I know where the external programs are, and I know what your caseload history is with the county because I can see it right here in Data Zone. Plus, I have access to county systems, and I can use my PIN to get into the county systems and see what kind of experience we've had with you at the county that may not be in Data Zone. So I said more than I wanted to say. All I really wanted to say was about a year and a half or 2 years ago, I'm just basing it on a couple of examples. Milpitas, I think, was one, and I want to say Mountain View Wisman was another one where they were just told straight up, if you want to sign up, you got to sign up for both. We can't have you just in one of them. Can't have you without data zones. But I don't know that it's been institutionalized other than the staff saying that's what we want. I don't think the Board of Supervisors has ever made it a policy declaration.
Well, and actually that was what was a little surprising to me about the item that was on our agenda on Tuesday, is that so and
Yes, that was
actually,
surprising to me, too.
yeah, we were both like, what? We've been in these meetings a ton. And I think, Dr. Smith, you wanted to weigh in too?
I can wait until you're done. I just wanted to, without being a lawyer, give you some slight insight into what was talked about legally. So whenever you think that's appropriate, let me know.
You mean in terms of data zone?
Yes.
Yeah, I think yeah, let me just make a kind of a broader point and just see what you think about this. So I think one of the really incredibly good things that has happened for the county of Santa Clara in the last really 3 years has been the increased partnership that we've had with the County Office of Education. Like, I think it's just been phenomenal. And I think Dr. Dewan's amazing. What I'm really trying to think about, or maybe ask us to think about, is in a global way, what do we want our partnerships with the schools to look like so that we're better able to get buy-in and leverage and all those things that we want to do so that we're more aligning our systems with what we want to get what we want to be, how we want to partner with the school districts. So to that end, and Dr. Smith, this is kind of a request and something I just want you and Dave to give some thought to, is that right now we have interactions with the schools on a whole series of issues, and that is inclusive of everything from how we're working with them on teacher housing to our mental health services work, to us wanting to get into schools early to work on prevention, to us funding different services that have interface and interaction with all the schools. And my concern is that we're not managing our partnerships in a way that allow us to get the most outcome for the money we're investing, A, and B, create a relationship that is much more that leads us to having a different kind of organizational relationship. So an example I'll give is that San Jose Unified, is there anybody here from San Jose Unified? Not to put you on the spot, so San Jose Unified, as an example, has had concerns about data zone for a long time. And I knew that, and as a matter of fact, part of our outreach, I stopped worrying so much about them and really focusing on schools that were a little more interested in sharing data. And so that was, but now at the same time, we're dealing with San Jose Unified just on expansion of mental health services, on public health, working on anti-vaping. And the Bay Area Air Quality Management District called me to say that they had some money to be able to retrofit a couple of community rooms in schools for air filtration. So when that air gets bad again, that we have safe places for especially low-income families. So so San Jose Unified has said, okay, we want money for housing, and we want resources for mental health services, and I'm just using them as an example, but we're not comfortable with data zone, and they have some good reasons on their own that they feel strongly about that. We're not comfortable with data zone, and by the way, we don't want to do this other little thing that you want us to do to make this community room. Now, from my perspective, we should be, if we were managing our relationships with the schools a little differently as real institutional partners, we would have somebody in the organization that kind of owned those relationships, so that we're looking at our whole, the whole impact of our partnership with them. Because for us to give, for BachMed, for example, which we fund, like this is county money going to the Bay Area Quality Management District, coming back to us, our taxpayers' money, it's property tax, and to have a school that has as many students as it does, and that has locations in the high impacted areas for poor air quality, for them to say, we want this, but not this, and us not to be able to say, whoa, here's the way we'd like to partner with you, makes me feel a little like we're not leveraging our partnership and our relationship in a way that meets multiple goals for us and multiple goals for them. And so, and they're big and they're busy. They've got a lot going on. So this is literally me saying, how do we do a better job of being partners? Because I do feel like it's a little tentacled for us, like that we're reaching into them in a lot of different ways, and we're putting them in and I don't mean this in a bad way, but we're putting them on the spot to prioritize what they're interested in working with us on, instead of us saying, here are the 10 things we're going to try to accomplish over the next 5 years, housing, blah, 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 blah. And here are the programs that we have to offer. How can you participate in them? For another just kind of odd thing, we've invested a ton of money in the Healthier Kids Foundation to do screenings. And not all the schools, now the schools want them, but for a while the schools were like, no. Well, for us, if we don't get those screenings, those kids are going to cost us and them tons of money if we can't get on the front end. So I would just like your help in helping us think more broadly about our partnership writ large. And I think Marianne could be really helpful to us having that discussion, but it may be us having a discussion with the superintendents and, to really better be able to say, here are the services we provide. What are your needs? Here's what we need from you in order for us to have that partnership. Because to be perfectly blunt with you, for us to try to give schools money to do things that are win-win, to me means that our relationships aren't aligned enough that we can properly make the case to them, because I don't think these are foolish people. I just think we're all talking to different layers in the organizations. So I didn't mean to detract so much, but when we had this conversation on mental health, I was so struck by the one-offness of it, because I've been aware, as I'm sure you and Dave have, of all the different things we're talking to the schools about. And it was perplexing to me that these weren't more holistic discussions. I don't know if either of you have thoughts on that.
Well, yes, I agree that would be an ideal approach. That would be the best approach. And it requires, I guess the part for Dr. Smith is I'm assuming, just based on what I've seen, would require just a little bit of management structural changes, let's just say changes or augmentation for the county, to have, to be taking a more assertive role, as the way I would put it in that regard. But yeah, it's so I'm for that. As to Data Zone itself, so Data Zone has a leadership. Data Zone, first of all, was really one of the major partners of it is University of California. UCSC has been part of the design of that program all along. Our legal department has been part of the design of it all along. And I know that because I was asked as a member of the board some years ago to be on the leadership council for Data Zone, which includes a very significant number of people in CBO leadership, like Chan Zuckerberg, for example, directly involved in the program. So I'm very confident that it's been vetted. But the interesting thing about all this, and you've heard me say this before, Supervisor Chavez, having been around for a while in elected office, is not only has Data Zone been aspired to, in our education community for years because of the lack of articulation in data between school districts and within school districts vertically. So for example, Eastside Union High School District has 7 feeder districts. Beneath that, of course, we have First 5 or integrated with that. And if you don't have common data systems, which they don't on their own, a Franklin McKinley student will go to Eastside Union if they don't transfer to San Jose Unified because the family moved. They'll go to Eastside Union, and the only the first indicator you get of that child's capacity and performance is the first grading period freshman year, because you have no data. There had not been a data zone in the past that would give you that information, that would allow this child to be supported in a way that they land on their feet. San Jose Unified, the unified means they don't have feeder districts, right? They have K through 12. So they have historically had a little less concern about data sharing, because they could feel like they can share much of what they need internally without needing the county or anyone else to help break down those barriers. But it doesn't, it's a little bit of a short-sighted view, in my opinion. It's the nicest way I could put it, because you do have transfers in and out of the system. It would mean that they are a standalone, sort of a standalone entity that needs no shared information from county systems. That in a sense, to me, what they're saying is, if there's a child in probation and we don't know about it, that's okay. Our systems are strong enough and good enough to deal with that child. The consequences of finding out a little bit late, if so to speak, that child is a justice involved or duly involved youth, we'll deal with it. We can handle it. And I just think it's, I don't want to call it an arrogant attitude, but it's a short-sighted attitude in my opinion. So going back to the report on school-based mental health resources for youth and the referral by Supervisor Ellenberg, which I've been supporting, and I know you've been supporting, what's important, I think, is to not lose sight of the fact that mental health coordination and client services in the schools is just one aspect of, is just one issue among a myriad of issues that a schooling services coordinator would entertain on any given day. While we speak here in this committee, some schooling services coordinator is having a duly involved youth come in. Some schooling services coordinator is having a justice-only involved youth come in. Some schooling services coordinator is trying to place a youth with a community-based agency for non-mental health purposes. The beauty of what the county executive and behavioral health department set up with this is they figured out a way to fund schooling services with MHSA money instead of us having to try to leverage this with our general fund. But that doesn't mean and has never meant that it's a mental health only program. It's led by our mental health department, our behavioral health department. The first iteration of schooling services in the 90s was not. It was not led by behavioral health, but it was a very similar concept in that you need to have either a real multi-service team on the campus, or you need to at least have a virtual one. And the only way you get out a virtual one is to have data zone at your fingertips, or some kind of data access at your fingertips. So essentially, in a virtual sort of way, you can bring in what you need to know from any of the 40 departments or agencies that might have touched that child's life or that child's family. So what I'm unclear on is, if you move forward with a rapid expansion of mental health services on the remaining schools who aren't in schooling services, what do you leave behind, right? Are you leaving the infrastructure of schooling services and data zone behind, which I'm not for that. More importantly, are you sort of purposely minimizing the multiplicity of services that you would provide for the youth? Why focus so narrowly just on mental health when we've already got the growing infrastructure in our school districts through schooling services that provides not only mental health, but just about anything else a
So
youth
Dave,
might need.
Can we ask that question? I mean, Sherry,
to me, that's the question.
Yeah, that's actually a very good way of saying it. Can you answer the last question that Dave asked? And what he asked was, will Data Zone go along, and are we really building infrastructure that allows us to move all of our programs and services through the schools?
Yeah, I mean, I think we wanted to highlight in this particular report and legislative file the efforts and work that has happened with schooling services, because it did create this framework. Dating back to our earlier conversations, there was recognition that in as much as you can have many services on a school campus, the value of schooling services was bringing that level of coordination that wasn't there before. The collaboration between the school districts, the community, the parents, and the youth. So that idea of the campus collaborative was very important. To Supervisor Cortesi's point, the idea of co-investment was really critical, because previous generations of schooling services were primarily county funded. And we knew as we entered potentially lean budget times that we had to have the commitment of both school districts and county in partnership around the funding. And then the other piece is the data and evaluation. That was critical. We always had to be tracking in an ongoing way the way in which our investments were yielding the results we had hoped they would for students. So as we begin to think about the potential of expansion of mental health services across additional school districts, from my vantage point, we would never want to lose the value of schooling services, because you wouldn't want to just simply add additional services without the recognition and the importance of that coordination and support and co-investment. So, and the report may not have highlighted the importance of that, but that will be part of the planning process going forward to ensure that we are not losing those components. And the data and evaluation, as highlighted in the report going forward, will also be critical. I do think we've
just
please, yeah,
concretely,
go ahead.
so we are making it a precursor for expanding services to use data zone.
We are going to figure out a way to ensure that we will have data that we can collect across school districts as we proceed forward. That data and evaluation piece remains. I do want to highlight, I think one of the challenges associated with that particular area is there are costs associated with it. So there is an upfront cost to move into data zone, and then I believe there's a $3 per pupil cost for every individual student that is in the data system. So, you know, reasonably, I mean, that's a concern of a school district like San Jose Unified or Eastside Union High School District, where you have, you know, thousands of students and there are associated costs. So I think we would have to think about what are ways in which we can have that potentially be something we would want to consider while recognizing that there are costs associated.
So just to be clear about this, I think we have to answer that question before we expand. And we've put a lot of energy and time and resources ourselves into data zone, and if we shouldn't do that, that's important to know. But I think the point that Dave's raising about really being able to access data and figuring that question out is critical. And so that's kind of the first thing. And then the second thing is that, I'll just share this with you, Dr. Smith, that the infrastructure that we're going to need to expand and maintain this relationship with the schools, I think we're going to have to think about how to make that something that's internal to the county. And the reason I'm sharing that is that I cannot emphasize enough how fabulous it's been to work with Mary Ann, but we've had lots of different challenges with that partnership with that entity in the past. I think it's getting stronger, but Dave's been in education here and served on school board, and it's very up and down. And I'm also a little concerned about the way the state's treating County Office of Eds in general with some of the changes they're making and defunding them. And so I just want us to make sure that whatever infrastructure we're thinking about it countywide, and we're thinking about it internally, you know.
Right.
Can I
Actually-
just on the to-do list, Dr. Smith, before you comment, I think it should be explored. Let me back up. So, data zone, obviously, and schooling services are separate but tethered together, as we've been talking. Schooling services is ours, and however it grows or proceeds is totally entirely up to us at this point. Data zone is owned by the County Office of Education. What complicates it a little bit is the partnership that was set up originally includes San Mateo as well. So it's obviously the data is not commingled, but San Mateo is benefiting from data zone. There's just two counties in it. But we have had casual but clear conversations in the past with the County Office of Education, and I've certainly mentioned at the county executive that it would be good to figure out on this point of bringing the infrastructure in-house what it would take to essentially just acquire data zone from the county office, and then, you know, whatever's happening with legalities and data, the control, the management of the data itself and the confidentiality and privileges, things that need to be protected would be in-house with the county, just like we control HIPAA data here, we control behavioral health data here, we fight or don't fight even interdepartmentally about how we share information here, but at least that would be, you know, sort of come in and be part of our own infrastructure. And frankly, the County Office of Education, as we all know and as they readily admit, has capacity issues when it comes to expanding programs based on their limited budget. So what they really did is they created I think the greatest thing I've seen them create in the last 27, 28 years that I've been involved, but they don't really have the capacity to bring it county-wide in 32 school districts by themselves. Thus, there's been a little bit of a rub of us having to go to the school districts and ask them, you know, for a contribution, which is really, I think it's about $12,000 per school or district or something that's really going to the county office. And it's not greed on their part. It's just them trying to break even. So on the to-do list, as a committee, I would like to ask that we bring back as part of the analysis what would be the cost, you know, enter into a more serious discussion or negotiation with the county office and see what would it take to bring it in-house. Not even necessarily to exclude them from the program, but let's turn the tables and say we own it. And what are the implications of that?
Okay, good. And then Dr. Smith, and then I apologize to Eleanor. I usually take public speakers first. I just noticed the card. I had it. I just noticed it.
Well, I think the committee members have pretty much said everything that I had to say. It's really, as you said, complex problem in terms of the politics with 32 different districts and the Office of Education, and trying to get everybody on the same page of the mission playbook and have, you know, coordinated effort. We've seen that, as Supervisor Cortese knows from personal experience, very prominent in school link services, where not all school districts thought they wanted to participate. I think in the off-agenda confidential memo, there will be a lot more from County Council, but I think the core issues, in addition to getting everybody on the same page of the playbook, have to do with the fact that each school district uses data zone in a different way, and there's different opinions about confidentiality that they have, and obviously we have confidentiality of the data that we control. And you know, as the committee well knows, the only way to enforce confidentiality is in ongoing operations. It's not, depends on who's using the data and how they're using it and the like. So you've elucidated all of the problems better than I can, but I just, before you started, I was just going to say that's pretty much what you're going to hear from County Council.
Got it. That's really helpful. Thank you. So we're going to take one public comment from Eleanor. And again, I apologize. Is she still here? Did she have a birthday by the time we finish this discussion? Come on up if you'd like to speak. Thank you.
Supervisor, Chair Chavez, while she's coming up, if I can ask, I know we have one of our judges here who needs to speak on item 16, and maybe we could
you
take
can
that
come to the
item up
podium.
when we
Yeah,
conclude this
that
item
would be
out of
great.
order.
Great,
Thank you.
thank you, no problem. Eleanor, welcome.
Good morning. Thank you so much. Eleanor Castillo-Sumi with Uplift Family Services. And it's very interesting to hear all of the comments about school-based mental health services. But at Uplift Family Services, we would like to note that we are absolutely in support of the expansion of schooling services. And I guess my comments here today has to do mostly with requesting that in this process that community-based organizations are also brought into the planning and the assessment process. I think that's really critical. As we talk about schooling services, we also want to be cognizant of, the children needs expanding beyond the school hours. So being there after school hours, over the holidays, over summer, so making sure that happens. The other issue that we're concerned about is also the workforce shortage. We understand that Fresno is a model that's being considered and we are a statewide organization. We have firsthand experience of having our staff being lured into the education world and having to, that exacerbating the workforce shortage. So partnerships, I think, with CBOs are, really important. The other point that I guess we wanted to raise was the fact that we know that the Mental Health Student Services Act has put out an RFP that is due in January 28, I believe. And again, bringing in the CBOs as part of that planning process, would be critical for all the points that you've talked about and, the additional points that I've raised. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eleanor. And I apologize again for not bringing you up sooner. And I want to thank the staff. This is really good work. The fact of the matter is we couldn't be having this level of discussion but for your already really excellent work. So thank you. So we're going to make a motion now to receive the report. I'm going to add to that Supervisor Cortesi's request to get information from County Council about the acquisition and/or a new structured partnership on Data Zone.
And county administration.
And county administration, thank you. And then the second thing I just wanted to add, really for Dr. Smith and Sherry, and for you all to give some thought to, is how do we better construct our partnerships with the schools? Just because our work is really expansive, what's the best way to do that without? Well, anyway, what are your thoughts on the best way to do that?
Would Supervisor Chavez, just to be even more specific on your point, on the last point, would it be good to have them come back with sort of an inventory of the relationships system-wide that the county has with each school district currently, not just schooling services? Because we have.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
All right.
Yeah, I think that's right. Let's do that. And actually,
It'll vary, but there'll be multiple items on each one of those lists, right?
Well, and actually, Dave, you'll laugh, but one of the first meetings I ever was here with you, you were asking for that same information.
Well,
and
I was going to say.
I mean, this was about 4 years ago. Well, actually, longer than that. But anyway, so I think that's a really, really great idea. Is just to maybe do a survey of us, and mostly it's this committee and probably. SSA, and even if we took a quick look with public health and some of our other services that are overreaching, that's a really good idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Right.
All right, so with that, you want to make a motion?
So moved.
Great, and I'll second that, and thank the staff very much for your thoughtful feedback and your willingness to talk to us again after we talked about it on Tuesday. And then we'll go to duly involved youth. This is item 16. And here comes the judge, so to speak. Well, and we appreciate that you are here and recognize that you have a courtroom to get back to.
Good morning.
Are you just going to speak and leave?
No, I'm going to stay.
Oh, then you can grab a seat. They're going to show you exactly. You're good. but they're going to give you a chair and a mic and get that PowerPoint loaded up. Great, welcome. And who's starting us?
I'll speak just to begin.
I'm going to take that thing down.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Judge Julia Elogimento. I am assigned currently to the Juvenile Justice Unit, and I am presiding over the DIY unit over in juvenile court. So thank you for allowing us to go out of order. I have a number of youth waiting for me to return so that I can hear their cases. I'm really going to have all of the other members present with me here today do the presentation on the PowerPoint. I just wanted to start off by noting a couple things that might not be contained within the report and just to kind of give an overview. The information that will be provided is based on information from 2018. I know that this is a really important unit for the county and I know it's important for children and families. What I wanted to highlight was presiding over the DIY unit is a collaborative court. It is an amazing court in juvenile justice, and some of that might not exactly be reflected in the report, but we do court very differently there. It used to be, before we had a duly involved unit, the case that a judge had to determine that either a minor was in the dependency system or in the juvenile justice system, and that, in my view, would have put me in an awful position of making that choice because, quite frankly, they need services frequently that fall in both, and often they do need to be monitored by probation to make sure that the community also is safe when we rehabilitate the youth and move them back into the community. When I have my court, every person is present, from social services to, we have social workers, we have behavioral health, and we have lawyers, and we have probation, and that's a pretty unique thing and really allows us to collaborate in a way that makes the best decisions and hopefully the best outcomes for this youth. The only other thing I wanted to point on is a lot of changes have happened in 2019 that are not going to be reflected in this report. We are in the process of gaining additional data and information and plan to do a further submission to the county so that they can see the changes from 2019. But one of the bigger changes is Chris Bijou, who is with us here, came as a program director at the very end of 2018, so had to compile a lot of information for this report based on things that were happening prior to him being present. I also became the judge in January of 2019. So we've done a lot of changes this year, and I just wanted to highlight they're not going to be reflected in this 2018 report, but we do intend to provide supplemental information so you can see that, because I think we're making great strides over the last year. So I just wanted to start out with that before you kind of hear a report from 2018.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Mike, are you getting us started?
Good morning, board members and committee members also. I'd like to just introduce also, all the folks know these folks already, that I have Chris Bijou with me today. I also have Sherry Turo, Director from Social Services, from Behavioral Health, and Dan Little, Assistant Director from DFCS. So I just want to echo something that the judge had mentioned. And I think this is also not going to be in the report, but it's also, I think, highly significant to mention at this point, is that this has been a highly collaborative movement from the very beginning. Even though it started out with probation and the FCS primarily, it was very quickly noticed that we needed to have behavioral health as a member of that initiative. This collaboration has prepared us in ways that we had not realized it would. It really brought us together and improved our ability to respond to crisis and situations in a collaborative way that shared leadership, resources, staff, our individual disciplines from our individual departments in a way that the county probably has never seen before. And I think that has really spoken a lot to the collaborative spirit of the county. But I think it's really been reflected in the most recent crisis that we have faced as a county. And the response has been tremendous. And I think the DIY initiative really prepared us in ways that we did not expect to handle these crises that we're now facing. So in calendar year 2018, the DIY unit assessed and completed the 241.1 W&I report process for 63 youth. And again, this is where the court plays an intricate role in guiding the process and determining who will be ultimately duly involved. And it's a partnership that this process could not proceed without. Of those 63 youth, 44 duplicated and 43 unduplicated youth remained in the unit and received services. Also of note is that the 21 other youth who did not receive services were effectively diverted out of dual system involvement by this process, which is also a positive outcome. The program utilizes the Child and Adolescent Needs, the CANS assessment tool through behavioral health, the Juvenile Assessment Intervention System, JACE tool, through the Probation Department, and other indicators to help the team identify important focus areas to divert services and support and to inform this evaluation. Who did the unit serve? 72% were male, 59% identified as Latinx. Also note that 22% of the youth spoke Spanish as a primary language at home. 93% of the youth in this involvement unit were either high or moderate in terms of criminogenic risks. The average age of the youth served in the unit was 14, and we also noted that an alarming number, only 27%, live with parent or guardian during this period. Youth spent an average of 6.7 months in this unit. And we also noted that our female youth spent an average of 7.7 months in this unit, which is slightly higher than we experienced with our male youth. One of the things that we used in terms of measuring progress was we did initial assessment at intake and also at closure. It also indicated, data also indicated that youth in this unit experienced the services that was provided from this unit. There was a decrease in gang involvement and also a decrease in gang association. The data also suggested that during this period that the youth spent with us, approximately again 6.2 to 6.7 or 7.7 months, there's also a decrease in polysubstance usage throughout this population, which was again a large testament to the programming the unit provides. Ultimately, the youth during this period, 75% of the youth who participated in the program did not recidivate. Ultimately, what this meant over time was that the number of unduplicated youth served in this unit has continued to increase over the years. The percent of male youth has slightly increased over the last 2 years, but showed a marked increase from 2015. Also noted that over this time period, substance use remains high across this population. And another trend that we're also seeing that has maybe some cause some concern is that the average age of the youth acquiring DIY services has continued to lower, so we're now facing a lower population on average in this unit.
Do you mean instead of 14, they're younger than, the average age is younger than 14?
The average age in 2015 was 16.7. It's steadily decreased, 16, 17.
Oh, I see. The
all the
trend.
way to 14.
Thank
so,
you.
Yeah, so haven't gone below 14, but that is a marked decrease over 3 years.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, Dan Little with DFCS. I'm going to run over some of our next steps. The first and foremost, I think we've identified this in some other presentations, with the state's continuum of care reform impacting kind of the group home level of care. This is one population that was significantly impacted by that shift in resources. So as we're developing our continuum of care throughout the county with our stakeholders and providers, paying special attention to this population, that it makes sure that continuum meets the needs of all of the youth that we're serving, not just child welfare. The second component is really looking at the data and the outcome. I think this collaboration, one of the things that it has done is really highlighted that within all of our agencies, we all have our different mechanisms for tracking our outcomes. We have different mechanisms for identifying when are we successful or not. And I think as this initiative moves forward, it's really coming together to align all that to say, when we say success, what do we really mean by that? And what are the mechanisms that we can all share to use so that we don't have these three distinct kind of pools of data? So that's something that with Chris's expertise, he's helping lead that team to move forward on that. Third thing is with the further inclusion of behavioral health as a core member of that team, it's increasing their input on the process and their input on the kind of the day-to-day operation of the DIY unit. I think, as Mike pointed out, when the initiative first started, it was seen kind of as a probation and DFCS initiative, and I think really this is a three-prong initiative with behavioral health having an equal role in the care of those children. Fourth, and it was discussed in an earlier presentation today, is that importance of school, the importance of attendance. There's well known a lot of studies that show the impact of school attendance on positive outcomes. So making sure that in all of our work that school attendance component and school outcome piece is that central to all the work that we're doing. And lastly, it's the idea of the transition from a trauma-informed to a healing focus. So we've done a lot of work countywide on the impact of trauma, how to identify trauma. I think it's the shift then to say, what do we do with that? So shifting to that healing focus, what are the actions that we're going to do to actually work with that trauma to go to a healing component with those youth? So that's something that we're going to be doing, I think, with this unit, but I think across our system as a whole. That's going to take additional training, additional skill building with all of our staff. I think that's something you'll see as a collaborative effort we'll see across our department. So with that, I'll open it up to any other comments or open up for questions. Thank you.
Are there comments from the rest of the panel? No? So just a couple of just broad questions. First of all, this is, to me, one of the most interesting bodies of work that we're undertaking, in part because just of the required collaboration from multiple departments. And so in some ways, and I would just say this to you, Dr. Smith, that one of there are two outcomes that I'm really going to be interested in better understanding. One is the outcome of the children that go through the program, and I think that the recidivism rate is something we should certainly be examining. But the other is really exploring how we are developing program that is really cross-sectoral. I mean, just seeing this diverse group of people in front of us, it's an interesting thing to think about as we're thinking about the ways that we want to change how the county does business. So at some point it would be, I think, of value, and I'm not sure the right place to do this, but to just get a better understanding of what we're learning about how partnerships work best, particularly because we have an outside partner with the courts, and really being able to say, here's some elements of what that means. And there may be some very obvious things in terms of, building strong relationships and trust. There may be others that are more related to data, and there may still be others in terms of how we think about the being thought leaders around the next phases of work. So, for example, I think going from trauma-informed to what healing-informed means, we're going to learn a lot about what that means. This is a relatively small group of kids. There's probably some ahas that we're going to get out of that as it relates to how we think about the other services that we're providing countywide. But anyway, just a thought for you.
Yeah, I would suggest maybe as the chair, we set up a opportunity for a workshop to go into it in more detail with the full board, because it is a big, to use a bad word, big paradigm shift. And if we're going to really implement it, which we obviously need to do, I think we need to have full buy-off from everybody.
I think that's a really good point. Just to kind of explore the partnership a little bit more between the courts and the programming, I'm curious about how the coordination is working and what's still kind of needed. I don't know, Judge Algiamento, if you have some thoughts. I'm sure you, especially because you're bringing some fresh eyes to it because you're a little newer to this work.
Absolutely. I think a lot of the hard work, frankly, was done before I got here, which was nice. I think that there was trust building for the first few years, and I luckily walked into a true collaboration. So that hard work already happened. I think that where the struggles are, data sharing is an enormous struggle, and I think you were touching on it for some other areas just when I walked in and heard some other discussions. You know, when you have behavioral health and you have HIPAA issues, and then you have, you know, school that has information, then you have probation that has information, and how we share the information between the kids, that is something we are working on. We've started that process in 2019, but it is not met without barriers. So breaking down those walls so that we can really just look at the child and the family and figure those things out without having to struggle on who gets to see or hear what has been difficult. I also, I don't really know that this answers your question, but something that was said made me think about it. I will say that, so I hear the duly involved youth on Tuesday mornings. I welcome anyone who wants to come to court and watch how that court works. It really works quite differently than any other juvenile court. But I will say the emotions are high. There are really significant family issues. And just this population, the mental health issues are strong. Every child in there comes in with a lot of trauma background. And so being able to coordinate not only where are they going to live, but how do we address the behavior that they're engaged in, and all of those things has been, you know, a challenge. I think moving forward, it is great to have Chris on board as a coordinator. It's interesting to me because I will say the way these numbers play out is sort of different than I feel like I see it in court. So I don't know if our 2019 numbers will either be different. But some of that comes to once you've developed a unit. I think this is actually positive things that when issues arise, so for example, there might not be something going on in the dependency system, but a youth comes into juvenile justice because they've been arrested with a crime and they discover their dependency past. We are able to engage the dependency system on a voluntary basis, even though we don't want to involve them necessarily in that system. And that sometimes is a coordination that's really, really quite useful for the family because they're receiving services without filing a petition in dependency. So the way all of that works has been very interesting and I think a success.
Just another question just about the courts in general. Do you, and really this, I'm talking to our, just because we don't get you very often, taking a little bit advantage of that, but I'm wondering about when young people come in and you've got this array of services and you have a team, what is the bandwidth of flexibility that you have in how you handle the justice part of this?
Because we moved to a duly involved system, right? I mean, there are jurisdictions who are still under that. You're one or the other, not both. I actually have tremendous discretion and flexibility, but I rely on all of our experts. So what happens is when we're deciding how we're going to handle the youth, a report comes to me for that. But we have really, it's very child focused and family focused and broad discussion on do we even need juvenile justice involvement? If it's a low level crime and really they need services, maybe we're just going to have them involved in the dependency services side. or it's both, because there's a high-level crime. I get to decide who's the lead agency, and we work through it that way. So there's a lot of decisions that do happen in court, but through great input and collaboration. I also don't know that it's noted in the report, but the teams actually coexist now. So not only are they collaborating together, but probation basically sits with DFCS and in one unit. And so just talking through how they're going to handle a child, all of that happens before the report even comes to me.
So, and I'm going to compare this to adult court because I've only actually been in the juvenile courts a couple times.
You're welcome anytime.
Yeah, I heard you Tuesday mornings. We have board meetings every other, but we'll figure that out.
Okay.
But what I'm specifically interested in is that one thing I observed, and I cannot remember if this might have been in, I can't remember whose court it was, but one of the things I observed is that the reports that you get from the team in terms of understanding the needs of the families and the kids, how does that, are we offering you, I guess what I'm wondering is, does this collaboration allow us to expel kids when necessary from this and their parents from either system faster?
Yes.
And okay, that because you have
100%.
more information. Okay.
I really do believe that because sometimes, we're working on even making that happen sooner. There are times when probation recognizes that a kid who comes in to probation has a lot of issues in DFCS, and maybe they're going to get services. Sometimes probation will address that or let the defense attorneys address that, and maybe the DA's office doesn't even file. They don't become part of the probation system at all. Other times, once we feel that services are in place, and really you don't need probation looking over them if the crime is not a community protection issue, they don't become part of that. Similarly, sometimes they're not needed to be, I'll say, pushed into the dependency system, and all of their needs can be met through probation, then we'll do that. So we're very aware of.
But you're getting the information also that you need.
I believe,
and then
yes.
Just one last question, then I'll let Dave chime in. How has this impacted, do you think how this impacts the rake or other areas that we should be thinking about? From an like here's what we could or should be doing.
So to me, for this unit, the two major areas that are struggles where I will have the whole team and myself in court looking for a solution and not finding one is one, yes, the rake, some temporary housing. We don't ever want to get to where a child doesn't have a home to go to, and so the answer is the hall. But when there's not a group home, and I know all the reasons, not to revisit that, but when there's not a group home, when the rake is not the appropriate place, when you start saying there's no answer, there literally is no answer. And so I know there's a lot of work about the rake, but that was often the place that was recommended to the court, and there was nowhere else to go. And so sometimes, even though I didn't think it was necessarily the right place, if that's your only option, sometimes that's what you're left with. So that is an aha. We really need some temporary housing that also provides services for these kids that don't have a family to go to. And sometimes it's with monitoring. If I'm going to send a kid home on EMP, but they don't have a home, but I need a little bit more monitoring for community safety, there's sometimes just no option for the dually involved youth for that. And we struggle with that. So what often might be the answer is they go without any monitoring, and then maybe they get in trouble again, and that's not helpful to anybody.
Right.
And the other, like I said, is I just think that mental health services are a little bit much more intensive with this group, and we don't always have a good sort of short-term option for the real high needs.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dave. Sorry about that.
No, it's not. No, yes, I appreciate all that Q&A. And I was going to ask the rate-related question. In the sense, you answered the question, but I'm just kind of affirms for me that some sort of additional in-house individualized placement for those very difficult cases is critical so that you're not literally left up in the air with what to do while you're on the brink of a judicial order. On what is your, we also had, besides the rate, another interesting and deep conversation we've had very recently was on the whole gambit of services that has sort of, over the last 18 years, sprouted out of Laura's Law relation to that. I'm not saying Laura's Law per se, which is strictly outpatient treatment, but there's this sort of, we're having all that come back to us again, in part because I think there's such a broad spectrum of things going on and things available, tools available to use, that it was a bit much for one Board of Supervisors meeting for us to distill that all down. I'm curious, though, much of that discussion's around the adult population that we had last Tuesday in the board meeting. What are your capabilities in that regard? I mean, we hear, critics, particularly, or concerned citizens, so to speak, say, well, you need to be able to mandate, if not psychotropic medication. Obviously, you wouldn't do that directly as a judge, but you need to be able to mandate psychological or psychiatric services somehow, because oftentimes the person, and I suppose that'd be particularly true of a youth, wouldn't have the insight to know that they need it themselves. So that push of mandating. Do you do that now? Can you do that? To what extent is that a tool in your toolbox? And I'm as much trying to dispel myths about what you can and cannot do than anything.
I think it's different and dependent on which court you're in to some degree. Obviously, in dependency court, the judge there has a little bit more discretion in mandating even medication because they're kind of acting in the role of a parent for children who don't have parents. In juvenile justice, I do have discretion, and quite often part of the probation and recommendations, and in this unit, also from behavioral health and DFCS, is treatment. And so, yes, we order treatment all the time, and we have the ability to do that. We can't force medication, and for me, the struggle becomes more. My biggest struggle in juvenile justice related to mental health issues is when you have, and let me start by saying this is an incredibly limited number of people, but for the youth that have this, we don't really have a good option. We do not have any real wonderful forms of a locked facility or I mean, even if not locked, a really secure facility for people who have high level mental health that creates a danger to themselves and the community. And the hall is not the right place for those people. But we really struggle, frankly, statewide, I believe, and people can correct me if I'm wrong, but just from my experience, there are such limited opportunities to address that. And like I said, it's a real, I mean, if these numbers are small, we're talking a minuscule number of people that's related to, but there is no answer for those, and that's a real struggle. For people who need outpatient, the minors get treatment access in the hall, they get it at the ranch, they can get it outpatient. I feel like we're doing that pretty well.
So it sounds like it's fair to say we don't, for outpatient, for youth, at least relative to the ones you see. I mean, that wouldn't be the entire population out there on the mental health side, but from outpatient justice-involved youth who need outpatient treatment, you don't need anything else from the.
Not necessarily. I can order, I mean, if probation's recommendation or in the duly involved youth, the joint recommendation is for inpatient, we utilize Advent, we utilize, I mean, there's quite a bit, and often they'll start at that and then move to outpatient. So
But
all
there's
of
a-
those tools are in our tool belt.
That's what
to
I was
use.
asking.
Yes.
You
I
don't
think-
need the Board of Supervisors to say, you give some policy blessing or
No, we have
take
the
advantage of some state law that we haven't taken advantage of to enable you to do what you need to do.
No, quite often that it's the right resource for a youth is as opposed to the halt some inpatient treatment first if their needs are really either dual diagnosis, kind of mental health and substance use, or strictly substance use. We have the ability to do that.
Yeah, I appreciate your response very much. And at some point, it would be, at the risk of burdening you, it would be, or even this entire team, I think it would be helpful to have this testimony as we continue to talk about, as we continue to hear back at the Board of Supervisors, at the full board on
Oh, that's right.
tools needed or not, around mental health issues and what can be mandated and what can't. Because again, I think there's a lot of myths out there that somehow the Board of Supervisors or the powers that be have not enabled, have tied your hands, and I speak to everyone here, in terms of what can be done, what can be mandated throughout the whole demographic spectrum. But
Right.
the youth piece shouldn't be lost here. That should get out. I think it's hopeful for people to understand that we can start intercepting and doing treatment early in these cases without it being entirely voluntary, so to speak. Back one last thing. You used the word monitoring a few times, and I understand enough what the judicial implications of monitoring would be, especially with the justice-involved youth. Need for mentoring. I'm curious about any reaction that you have to that, because it's something in my office has pushed for a number of years to try to figure out how we can get the county more involved in the expansion of mentoring services along the same lines. It came up for me because of what you said about returning a youth back into the community, without monitoring. And I thought, well, that sounds so familiar to me over the years, saying we don't want to return them back into the community without mentoring, because it just seems like a recipe for failure. That's my opinion, but you don't have to agree with that.
No, I think that it's been pretty widespread accepted that mentoring is a positive thing for youth. It might not be the only thing they need, but certainly it's always helpful in my mind. We work with a number of different groups already, that is something quite frequently that is part of the case plan for a youth. So FLY has a very strong mentoring program. We have CASAs and CAFAs, and all of those are wonderful for our justice-involved and system-involved youth. So we are looking for that. A lot of the RAPT-based services, I believe, provide some of that. So it is something we utilize, and certainly we feel is a very productive thing. We support it. It is being utilized, and like I said, I think the more the merrier. It's not something that anyone would think is not beneficial for the kids. It certainly is.
Okay, well, we'll keep an eye, and please let us know if you start running into capacity issues there. I'm extremely intrigued in a policy way about where the areas that you've identified today where capacity is an issue. Beds, intake, inpatient. It sounds, again, more of an issue of, it's not that we can't mandate it or direct it. It's just that we got to have the capacity, the rake situation that we talked about, and then even the mentoring. I was just, again, asking a similar question, and I would want to know if you start running into just basic capacity issues. This would have been a perfect case for a mentor, but we just, couldn't get one assigned in this case. That would be something I would want to be working on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just one last broad question for all of you is, do we have a waiting list for the program?
For DIY?
Yeah.
No.
We're at capacity. I mean, we don't have more kids who need the service. We don't have to grow it right now.
No. Unless someone else wants to answer that differently, I'll let them speak to whether.
Yeah, Mike, I was just curious. I mean, not to put
capacity.
you on the spot, but I guess I will.
No, and again, this was a 2018 report, so we have already increased staffing in the unit for 2019, and that's one of the reasons we were kind of hesitant to do this report at this
I know, and I
junction.
was very annoying. I wanted to know more earlier. Yeah, thank you.
But there are some things that were changed in 2019 that would increase our capacity. We also had added a supervisor for our behavioral health, which again will increase the footprint of behavioral health in this unit. So we are
Excellent.
doing those things.
But and really, I just want to make sure we don't have a waiting list. We don't have kids who need these services that we can't get to right now.
No, we do
Great,
not.
that's good. Well, thank you very much. Any other comments?
No, thank you. It's been a great discussion.
Thank you. We'll receive the report. Go back to court.
I just want to say as a full disclosure, we have speakers all over the place. I'm sorry I had to leave for a couple minutes during the presentation, but I could hear from where I was. Thank you.
Great. So we'll go back to our agenda and hearing item 16. We had no public speakers on that. We're going to go then to item 13, and this is the senior hearing on older adult recommendations.
I can't turn this on. Is it green? Is it working? Oh, it is. There's no green light. Okay.
Thanks, Frank.
Should I start?
Yeah, well, I'm sorry. I
okay.
thought you had technical difficulties, so I was going to wait till they were all better. Go
Okay,
ahead, Dana.
you look very intense there. Okay. I want to thank Supervisor Chavez and Cortese for your leadership in support of the older adults in our county, and I want to especially thank you for hosting the special hearing on older adult issues on September 18th. This hearing was an outcome of our county's commitment to support our efforts as the first county to join the World Health Organization's global network of age-friendly cities. With all of its cities designated as age-friendly, in the last 4 years, the number of cities internationally has grown from about 260 to over 1,000 in 46 countries. So this special hearing is a part of our age-friendly efforts. The special hearing was focused on 5 areas that were high needs from our 2016 survey and community assessment. They were elder abuse, frauds, and scams, mobility, transportation, social participation and volunteerism, long-term services and supports, including caregiving, and housing. We added the report from the Office of Emergency Services regarding the then possibility of a PG&E power shutoff and what that would mean for older adults. Over a dozen experts reported on the problems and gave recommendations, along with over 30 people giving public comments. From those recommendations and comments, our report today includes recommendations that require board action. Other recommendations will be addressed through the Seniors Agenda Initiative. Under elder abuse, frauds, and scams, we recommend that a multidisciplinary team consisting of the District Attorney's Office, Social Services, Community Care Licensing, the California Attorney General's Office, and the County Ombudsman be convened to address the underreported crimes to our most vulnerable elders in the nearly 300 licensed assisted living and residential care facilities for older adults in our county. For transportation, We recommend continued support for the 7 volunteer driver programs that are providing over 14,000 rides to older adults who do not live near public transportation or need some special assistance. Under social participation and volunteerism, we are looking at the need that and the benefit that all older adults can play in supporting our community through volunteerism. And one is to begin with a countywide tracking of volunteerism by older adults by our public health behavioral health risk survey. Also, creating a task force or some sort of convening of county departments that currently utilize and would like to utilize older adult volunteers to be more effective in our recruitment and retention of volunteers, as also looking at how our county employees who are retiring, how they are planning to add volunteerism into their community. And it speaks to your sense of like each department has their own volunteer manager, but I don't believe any of them all coordinate or speak together on any issue or even marketing campaigns of how we get people to volunteer with county, be it parks, Valley Medical, or other departments. Under long-term services and support and caregiving, our recommendation is in collaboration with Long-Term Services and Support Committee, that there be commissioned a comprehensive study of caregiving needs, workforce, and infrastructure in Santa Clara County to really look at the growing needs of this part of our community. So far, there has been no kind of collaboration or even study of what would be specifically needed, especially looking at the workforce and what will be needed in the future. As part of the Public Health Department's Oral Health Initiative, we recommend that there be a partnership created with the Health Mobile with a federally funded, federally qualified health clinic to provide easily accessible and free dental care for older adults, really focusing on having the mobile health mobile go out to the 34 senior centers in our county. On the issue of housing, we looked at the growing number of homeless older adults, especially those experiencing homelessness for the first time, for building design, and for the rent burden. So under the homelessness, we just ask that you continue to grow the homelessness prevention pilot and offering a priority to older adults. Under the building design, to institute universal design features, especially in all new housing, and especially the production of extremely low income and supportive housing, and that there be a chance for those who do have a house already, that there be modifications, be support for the modifications in universal design. And the other issue that has been coming up to the attention, especially those in the housing community and the homelessness community, is that older adults already living in deed-restricted affordable apartments are facing severe rent burdens, and some of them are paying up to 40% of their rent, of their income, to rent, even though they are in something that is subsidized to some extent. So we are recommending that there be created a committee with representatives from the different housing organizations as well as the county to look at this issue and see what recommendations they could bring forward for relief for rent burden older adults, and to present that to the Board of Supervisors in the future. So in 12 days, I will change my talking point to say that in 10 years, our county will have a quarter of its population over the age of 60. And this is a significant demographic shift that must be planned for, not only to meet the unique needs, but also to take advantage of the benefits that older adults can bring. The county special hearing was a step in that direction. The state of California is also beginning to plan, with Governor Newsom appointing a task force to create a master plan on aging that will be completed by October 2020. The age-friendly network of cities, county, along with the state, will allow us to collaborate on shared goals, data, and resources to create an accessible and inclusive community for all ages. We look forward to addressing these recommendations, and we thank you for your attention.
So we have one speaker on this item. Vaughn, if you could come on up.
Good morning, Supervisors Chavez and Cortese. Again, my name is Vaughn Villaverde, and I'm the Associate Director of Health Policy at Working Partnerships USA. I'm actually here to speak in support of this set of recommendations from the Department of Aging and Adult Services and urge the committee to really move forward with implementing these recommendations. I was one of the presenters at the special hearing on older adult issues, and again, I'd like to emphasize how critically needed these services are for the large and growing older adult population in the county. And having presented specifically on long-term services and supports, I'd again like to underline how the lack of data on caregivers really prevents both the county and community-based organizations from adequately addressing this need. Having access to in-home caregivers not only improves health and mental health outcomes by allowing older adults to live independently in the community, but it also leads to long-term cost savings for the county by reducing rates of hospitalization and unnecessary institutionalization in settings like nursing homes. Working Partnerships remains committed to ensuring that older adults in the county are able to live healthy lives, and we look forward to continuing our work in collaboration with the county to further this goal. Thank you very much and happy holidays.
Thank you, Vaughn. All right. So I see you have a lot of supporters here. Yay. Folks who are excited about this. I wanted to make a particular recommendation on this, on the information that we received in our packets and then the explanation that was given by Diana. And one recommendation I would like to make, and this is really through Dr. Smith, is that I want to receive the report because that's what we're being asked to do today. But what I'd like to do is work with Supervisor Cortese and Dr. Smith to structure some recommendations to come to the full board in the first quarter of the year. And the reason I'd like to do that is that there were a lot of recommendations that require multiple departments to be integrated, and I just want to make sure that we're for lack of a better word, sort of covering all of all the corners so that we're not leaving anybody out or including someone who didn't get voluntold. And it seems to me the best way to do that would be for us to do a referral, work that referral through you, and then bring it to the full board.
Sure. Sounds good.
Any questions? Bob, are you okay with that? Okay, and we'll engage you. Diana, you're okay with that?
Sounds great.
Good. All right. So we're going to move a motion to receive the report.
So moved.
And Supervisor, we're just, for full disclosure, we're just going to work on a referral with staff and then bring something back in the first quarter. And Diana, we'll work with you so we can make sure we can communicate with folks both what we're going to be presenting, but recommending, but also to make sure we sunshine that and give people enough time to digest it. All right? Great. Thank you, everyone. We're going to move on to item 14, which is senior nutrition. And let me just move to that.
Good morning. I just made it. Vanessa Merlano, Senior Nutrition Program Manager.
Welcome.
First, I'd like to thank you, Supervisor Chavez and Supervisor Cortese, for the opportunity to present on the Senior Nutrition Program annual report for fiscal year 18-19. I think this year has been a really great year of transition and growth, and I'm really happy to be able to showcase that for you all today. I want to particularly acknowledge the Senior Nutrition Program team for all their hard work this year and their help in preparing this annual report for you all. So to start, I'd like to provide some programmatic highlights Last year, we grew from 38 sites to 40 sites. If you notice the map on your left-hand side, you can see where all of our sites are located in the county. This map is actually a map that highlights the people 65 and over that live 185% of the federal poverty level. So you can see that we're really strategically placed across the county to really address the needs of people that are on the lower income spectrum. We're really seeing a change in the demographics of our participants. Last year we had about 56% of our participants being of Asian descent, and the majority of those participants being of Chinese descent, followed by Vietnamese. So very much changing from a white Caucasian-centric population to an Asian-centric population. And last year we served a total of 1,231,627 meals to a total of 14,833 unduplicated participants. This includes numbers for both our congregate meal program and our Meals on Wheels program.
Keeps going up.
The Older Americans Act identifies specific priority populations that we try to reach through a program, and I think we're doing a really good job in that arena. One of the target populations are minority groups. The total amount of people that we target through our program are 81% minority. We also target low-income individuals. You can see on the top left that 52% of all of our clients fall below the federal poverty level. And if you look at our Meals on Wheels participants, that data point is even more stark. We target 81% people that are low income with our Meals on Wheels program. People living alone are also a priority population for us. In totality, for our congregate program, we target 31% of people living alone, and not surprisingly, for our Meals on Wheels participants, there's 62% living alone. I'd like to also highlight that 25% of all of our clients are at a high nutritional risk, and we use a scale that assesses nutritional risk based on disease state, age, dentition issues, and a variety of other issues to identify that. The Friendly Visitor Program, I think, is going really well. This program is one that's tied to our Meals on Wheels program, so individuals that are on our Meals on Wheels program can receive friendly visits from our subcontractor, which is the Health Trust, and currently we have 103 of our total clients on the Friendly Visitor Program, and in addition, I'd like to highlight that there is a minor typo on your PowerPoint presentation. It says 423 friendly visits. That's actually 423 pet food deliveries. We recognize that people oftentimes go without feeding themselves to feed their pets. And so we tied the Meals on the Friendly Visitor Program with pet food deliveries to address that need. Our mobility management program grew significantly from last year. We served about 2,000 more benefits between our bus passes and gas cards from last year to this year. So we provided a total of 11,541 bus passes and gas cards to all of our participants last year, and provided 16,134 paratransit rides. I would like to acknowledge, at least for our bus pass and our gas card program, we do prioritize people based on their income status, and we use the Elder Economic Security Index to identify folks that to qualify folks for that program, and we feel like that is a much better standard to identify people that are on a lower income spectrum, because it does take into account other areas like housing and medication as part of qualifying folks. So what's next? We are really excited to be partnering with the health trusts in this fiscal year to launch a restaurant dining program. We feel that some potential targets might be boomers that don't want to access our traditional service, but also perhaps those boomers that are continuing to work because of the high cost of living in this area and can't access our traditional 11 to 12 mealtime hours. Again, I did mention working adults, but also grandparents caring for their grandchildren. Grandparents can't access our program during the noon hour with their grandkids. So we think that this might be an opportunity for those folks as well, but also people that might need a dinner meal. And they'd be able to get either a subsidized or free meal with that. And then also we'll look at targeting areas where there might be higher food desert issues in our community. We'll continue to partner with the community to offer mobile dining options during summer months, targeting grandparents who care for their grandchildren and don't access our services like I had mentioned previously. Last year, we partnered with the Mountain View Wisman School District to host an intergenerational dining program at Rengstorff Park, and we provided 2,500 meals in a span of about 5 weeks for just adults. That doesn't include the children that were fed through the program, but had quite a bit of successes with that. And in the next couple of months, we're launching 2 new technology solutions. We're getting to the 21st century. It's kind of exciting. One will be a mobility management program database, and this will be able to provide us with real-time data and allow people to get on the gas card and bus pass benefits a month earlier. Currently, we're on a 2-month delay in qualifying an individual for that program, so there will be a 1-month delay with that. And then I think even more excitingly for me, we're going to be launching a GIS mapping application system. So we've been working with the Technology Services and Solutions team within social services to develop an app that would be sort of the equivalent of Yelp for the senior nutrition program. So people would be able to enter an address or a type of cuisine that they want to access or a type of community service like case management, and then the sites would populate on that app and it would show them the times that they're open and the cuisine that they're offering, and if they have a reservation system, what that would look like. So we're really excited to be launching that, and it also would come up with the bus routes so people would know how to access that particular site. And then last but not least, I think I would be remiss if I did not address the steep decline in Meals on Wheels participation in this last year. And so what we're going to do in this fiscal year to really address that steep decline is we're going to be launching a marketing campaign to increase awareness of the program. We're also going to start serving clients that drop off of the program to learn a little bit more about them and understand the reasons for dropping off. And last, we're going to host a Meals on Wheels open house for, in particular, I think, case managers, but also, I know we're expanding in terms of the amount of health and hospital systems that we've acquired as a county and really targeting those case managers to ensure that they know about the program. So we'll be partnering with Trio Community Meals, which is currently our frozen meal provider. To be able to do that open house sometime, hopefully in late winter / early spring. And I think another thing that we're doing in relation to Meals on Wheels to address that need is the Neighborhood Meals on Wheels program. So this fiscal year, we subcontracted with 2 additional providers, UICI and POSO, and they deliver daily hot meal options for those folks that are homebound. And the way I think that the trends are going, having those friendly visits coupled with the meal is, I think, a really great opportunity for the program. So with that concludes the report.
Great. Do you have any questions?
No, it was a very thorough report. I appreciate it, and even with our familiarity of the program, at least speaking for myself, some of what you highlighted was a little bit new and raised some greater awareness. So thank you for that.
The only 2 things that I wanted to just put on your radar, but also just to raise this for senior staff as well, is that, one of our partnerships that we really need to dive into is VTA, and this just reminds me again of how critical the route changes and all the work they're doing is really impacting us. And when we sit down and have our next meeting with them, I want to make sure that we have someone from this department participating. Because one of the interesting things about access, I mean, I would have been less surprised if we'd had more people, if we'd had a drop in people going to centers than I am people having a drop in Meals on Wheels, just because of the way it feels like the trajectory and the trend is going. That all being said, I think you're doing some really smart things to address it, but it will help us understand how we plan for the future years. And having that deeper dive with VTA, I think, is going to be really critical. And then the other question is, as we're looking at gas cards, there are a number of organizations that are making it really easy for people to get used electric vehicles. And so one of the questions I would also be thinking about is making sure that we're targeting even seniors, because people are able to drive, if they're healthy enough for a longer period of time, but seeing if they're really out, if there are people who are living in areas that are really far away, that we prioritize them for some of the programs that allow people to have access to low-cost electric vehicles, and then we have to think about charging and all those things. But as a population, as we have more and more people becoming seniors, I think that's going to be more and more necessary. So with that, we'll accept the report with those two requests to senior staff to include this program in discussions with VTA on both the bus side, but also with them through BachMed on the low-cost vehicle availability. So would you mind making that a motion for receiving the report?
Happy to make that motion to receive the report, including that direction.
Great, and I will second it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
You too. All right, so we are on item 14. I just want to say we discussed schooling services, so if we can get a motion to receive the report. This is item 17.
Yes, move the report, and I just want to say, pursuant to the conversation we were having earlier about the different array of services beyond strictly behavioral health that are involved with the program, that's very much broken down and highlighted in the report that we're moving to receive under item 17. So if anyone's interested in taking a harder look at what we were talking about in terms of the broader array of services, it's right there at number 17. So I'll move receive the report.
Great, thank you so much. And that moves us to item 15, which is in play. Welcome.
Thank you for having us here today. My name is George Montes. I work with the Social Services Agency Office of Contracts, and I'll let my colleagues introduce themselves.
Sorry, it's not turning on. Is this on now? Okay.
Yes, there you go.
My name is Crystal Chavez. I'm a management analyst at the Social Services Agency.
Good morning. My name is Rod Shao. I'm the founder CEO of InPlay.
So we are very happy to partner with InPlay. It's been active. This program has been active for 9 months, and we hit the ground running. The goal of this program was to centralize resources that are beneficial to Santa Clara County families and improve registration and access through a central online process. In a 9-month period, we've activated the contract. There was 300. We promoted the summer youth programs in there. That resulted with 389 participants. We engaged schooling services. We introduced InPlay to various county divisions, DFCS, DEBS, behavioral health, different libraries. Flyers went out to 400 staff. We activated the landing page on July 9th, 2019, and we just see that there's a need to have ongoing coordination, in particular to all the discussions with Data Zone, in particular to all the coordination with the different CBOs and the intended target population for this particular program that we are still kind of like working on. Rod will speak a little bit more around his vision and where he's taking us and the geographic area that he covers and other associations to that data zone that he may want to speak to real quick. And I think I just went through this whole slide.
Hello again. So when we first were considering collaborating 9 months ago, the focus was really around how do we connect the kids who most need after school and summer camps with local and affordable programs. And we know that there are many programs that the county has supported and funded, but oftentimes they have trouble actually getting kids to sign up. So the thought was, the vision was, to have an online, mobile-friendly activity guide that could help facilitate that and help engage the families, particularly those that are more low income. Because we know that 80% of kids from low-income households actually don't participate, and that certainly contributes to the academic achievement gap that school districts struggle with. So again, the fundamental problem we're trying to solve is connecting the kids who most need programs with those local and affordable programs. So the good news is, as you can see in the PowerPoint, we actually did get launched before July. However, we realized that the county is so big, we need to make it easier for families from all reaches of the county to be able to find relevant programs in their neighborhood. So the map on the left is a clickable map, so anybody can click on where they live and then immediately get dropped into relevant programs in their neighborhood. So that's the tool to find things, but we had to put programs on the store shelves effectively. You know, we have to fill the inventory. So we successfully reached out to 516 summer providers, and they in total would offer about 7,300 programs, and each of those programs would offer different sessions. So we collected extremely granular data, and we also made sure that each of the programs were tagged if they could serve kids that had special needs or those that were non-native English speakers. And then we also exposed all programs that offered financial assistance. So again, you know, we're trying to lower the friction, the barriers to entry for families who may need specialized programs. So once that was all up and launched, then the question is, once you've built it, are they going to come? And that's where we had a little bit more struggle. The Board of Supervisors asked that we train up all the county agencies that are family facing. And we've made a good stab at that. Many of the people who presented to you this morning, you know, SSA, behavioral health, schooling services, and then employment benefits. We did multiple trainings. So we felt like we did a pretty good job reaching the huge army of caseworkers that you have here in the county. There was one that was also suggested, which was health system. And we have reached out to them repeatedly, but we just haven't had we haven't gotten traction to actually get something scheduled so we can make this free resource available through their hospital workers and public health workers. But that's going well, and we will be providing refreshed information for those county agencies. The school districts has definitely been more of a struggle. So I was listening intently to the conversation that you were having this morning about the services that you fund, the programs that you fund for school districts, and how do you get them engaged and actually participating in helping the families to benefit from them. We've only got 4 out of 32 local districts to sign formal agreements. You know, their students represent about 11% of the county. But we are we have some strategies to go forward to try and get more of them engaged. So, but in our mind, working with the county agencies is aligned with our core mission of really trying to meet, engage the families that most need the services. And then the school districts are also those where we want to go wide. And I'm still confident that we'll be able to do that. It's just taking a lot longer than I was expecting. And now that I've heard what other program directors are going through, I can empathize with them. So, I'll stop there and answer any questions that you might have.
Dave?
I guess my only encouragement is, and this came up way back, when the referral first came along, I tried to bring up the notion of making sure that to the extent we have data zone working in tandem with schooling services, that that all be tied together with this. I mean, I appreciate you bringing it up in your oral presentation as an area to keep working on. But it just seems to me that if a schooling services, and that program, we just received the report, and again, I would encourage anyone who hasn't looked at it to look at it in terms of there's 29 schooling services coordinator positions out there and 19 schooling services district coordinators, 10 full-time equivalent feeder model coordinators, and we are active in 15 school districts. That's a lot of schools. And for them to have all those folks to have this top of mind, I think is actually more important than having the county agencies themselves, having it top of mind. That's just my 2 cents. And before it becomes top of mind, I think just like most things in life, there's going to be an early period of you just having to constantly be reminding them and not so much promoting, but attracting, sharing the attractiveness of the program and examples of how it's worked well in the 4 school districts where you are or with particular cases. Because when somebody's sitting with a family or a child and a family and the symptoms of need come up for a program, that's kind of typically an organic conversation. It's, well, I'll tell you what comes to mind for me as somebody here as a coordinator trying to help you, and that person's human and they're going to come up with whatever they've seen work or whatever they're familiar with. And the second thing about data zone is if that person is taking on a student who already has been in play in the past and is now at a different school, and a different coordinator is taking a look, trying to figure out what's worked for this kid in the past. I mean, if there's just a blind spot or blank spot in the data zone, it just doesn't share it. There's no way the coordinator could say, wow, I see that you were in play. Did you enjoy that? Was that good for your child? Well, we can do that again. We can plug in again. We didn't realize that was over at, Franklin McKinley and your child's now in Elm Rock. We can do that. In play is something we can connect with here as well. So those things all have to be working hand in glove. But I said I was trying to say something encouraging. I think just to encourage you to whoever's working on this to make sure they're literally pounding the pavement over, the year 2020 with our coordinators, saying it's really important to us that you be really aware of the potential for this program to help some of the kids that are coming in and out of your contact until finally it becomes second nature to refer kids into the program. I don't think there's any easier way to do it. I think it's just going to have to be done. It's a referral business, and it's just going to have to be done that way.
We completely agree, and I think we look at it the same way. I did look at some SLS reports where they talked to the 29 coordinators, and they found that referrals for after school and summer was actually the 4th most frequent request that they get. So I've gone before them 3 times. And in fact, we worked with their coordinators to design a casework referral tool in order to make it easier for them to make referrals when they're sitting alongside a family, either at a school site or actually on a home visit somewhere. So we took in a lot of their input to facilitate that informal relationship that you're talking about.
Thank you.
And I just quickly want to touch on the data zone. We actually, I worked with Dr. Dewan at the county office, and we have a formal partnership with them and are looking at the long-term vision of trying to integrate what we learned through in-play to help feed some of that information into the data zone. Because just as you say, schools know what's happening in the classroom, but outside of the classroom, it's much harder to know whether a kid participated in a program, how often they attended, and what type of program services they received. So we currently don't do registration, so we don't know if a kid actually signed up for a program. That's something that we're trying to build now. But if and when that happens, then we can really connect all the dots, and then we can integrate the data.
So that actually follows up on the question I was going to ask. How is it that you know about your contribution to the foster youth being signed up? Where do you get that number from?
That's actually something that all we did is we promoted it to the families. So
I could speak to that. Yeah, I could speak to that. The summer youth program had many layers of coordination to try to promote it through social media, through caseworkers, through our divisions. We also needed a central location to direct people to understand what they have available. And we did it. We did it through in-play. When families would ask and say, "What's there? How do I find out what's around my geographic area?" We would direct them to this website so they can look to see what resources there are. And that website directed them to either the two organizations that had it, either the City of San Jose or Kinship Adoptive Foster Parents Association.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it was just one other. The only thing I would just say is I would caution using numbers in reports like this only because, you can say it, promoting is great, but we don't know the impact of it. And anyway, so for what that's worth. I don't have any other questions, so thank you. I know this has been a long meeting, and I think the only thing was for us to receive the report, and so it's received. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on then to item 18, and this is our transition-aged youth report.
Hi, good afternoon. Dan Little with DFCS.
Don Long, DFCS Family Support Bureau Manager.
Maricela Martinez, Project Manager, DFCS.
Great.
So good afternoon, supervisors, members of the committee, and members of the public. Again, my name is Don, and before you today is the Transitional Aged Youth Services Annual Report. So we just want to provide a few key highlights for accomplishments and progress for fiscal year 2018 and 2019. So the slide highlights the key outcomes for transitional aged youth who exited foster care at age 21. During this reporting period, there were 198 non-minor dependent participating in extended foster care. Of those, 58 youth exited extended foster care when they turned 21. Of 83% receive a high school diploma or GED, 95 has housing arrangements, 71 were successfully connected to financial support, 97% has health insurance coverage, and 86% has permanent housing. The department believes that the high percentage of successful outcomes in each of these 5 categories result from a vibrant collaboration of services that guide transitioning youth to self-sufficiency. Other highlights include the 2nd annual graduation celebration that was held at Levi Stadium, of which we honored 75 youth. Of those, 50 graduated with a high school degree or GED, and 25 graduated from post-secondary education, including vocational schools. Community partners included the Bill Wilson Center, the Silicon Valley Court-appointed special advocates, and Pivotal, along with the San Francisco 49ers, who helped to sponsor the event. Related to the Intern and Earn program, there were 106 youth who completed the internship program. Among the IOP program, 404 youth were served, and the hub continues to serve as a resource center for current and former foster youth. Lastly, youth leaders gave input into the development of the goals and recommendations of the Joint Foster Youth Task Force and the design of the new hub space. Related to next steps, the DFCS will continue to work with the Office of the County Council and SSA's Office of Research and Evaluation to develop and pilot the Universal Basic Income Program for TAY youth. We continue to collaborate with Think of Us to support the TAY program with tech-enabled services. Thanks to the success of the Intern and Earn program and lessons learned, the DSCS and DEPS is developing an Intern and Earn 2.0 program that will provide TAY with year-round employment and links to post-secondary education. This year-round program will enable DFCS to provide ongoing training, mentoring, coaching, and workforce development for our TAY population. And lastly, I want to say that we will continue to collaborate with system partners to execute on identified goals set by the Joint Foster Youth Task Force. And with that, we're prepared to take questions.
Great. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you for the report and all of the good work. And I particularly wanted to say that we got good feedback from youth feeling included in their futures. And I just want to say how important I think that is. The only big question I had is how are the partnerships we have with the school districts relative to foster vision?
So it's my understanding that the Santa Clara County Office of Education owns and operates Foster Vision, DFCS, probation. We are the consumers. We utilize Foster Vision database. So a lot of our work with the school district relies on County Office of Ed to develop those MOUs so that they can enlist. Out of the 32 school districts, I believe all of them are enrolled except for 2.
With those 2, where are we in that? Or are you saying that's the County Office of Ed's job?
Yeah, they're working on an MOU.
Oh, so they're in process
their side,
with both. Yeah. Oh, excellent. That's really, really good. The only other thing I wanted to add is just a very big thank you. And if it's in the report and I missed it, this was something that popped into my head because of a conversation we were having the other day. Do we do exit interviews with young people as they leave foster care?
Yes, absolutely. We do exit interviews with all TAY youth, and we also report that to the California Department of Social Services.
So, are there a set of questions we get from the state?
So that report is directly from the California Department of Social Services. It's called the Exit Outcomes Report for Foster Youth. So they actually have a set of data and domains in relation to housing, education, employment that youth complete before they exit.
So they do it
foster
themselves.
care.
Do we do an interview with kids ourselves? Do we do that?
Not necessarily. We, rely on the exit outcomes report.
So one thing I just would want you to think about is how we do that and whether or not we should. And in particular, I'm interested in programs that we provide specifically that may be different than that are provided by the state, and why they leave at one age versus another. All of those kinds of questions now that it feels like our programming is more robust in other parts of the state. So I'm not sure we would be comparing apples to apples. I'm not asking you to do that today. I'm just curious if you could give some thought to whether or not there's a benefit to us doing that.
I think there is. I think that hearing from the youth about their experience in foster care and learning the deficits, and then also all of that leads to improvements in our programming. So I do see a benefit in
Maybe strategize amongst yourselves about how to do that, and we should just think a little bit about what the opportunities may be. And like I said, I'm really open to getting your thoughts on that. But keep up the good work, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're going to receive that report, Dave? So received?
Received.
All right. Our last one is the rake verbal report. And Bob, are you doing that? Or, oh, Dan, you don't get to leave? That's you. Okay.
Yep. So I'm just going to provide a real brief update. So as of today, we have 6 youth currently kind of under the umbrella care of the receiving center. 3 of the youth are on site at Enborg. 2 of the youth are being cared for at off-site, kind of one-on-one situations, and 1 child is currently AWOL, and I'm including that child here because they go back and forth from AWOL to the receiving center. Today we have placement identified for 3 of those youth. We have another youth that's going to be going to placement on Monday. Our youth that is AWOL, we actually have a placement we're holding for them, so as soon as they return, we can transport them. And when all of those free up, we'll actually be able to transport our 1 remaining youth to an offsite to have the one-on-one space, which will then clear out all the youth currently at the receiving center.
That's great. Thank you very much. Dave, do you have any questions about that? Thank you, Dan. And please share our thanks with the staff.
Will do. Thank you.
All right. Bob?
Just quickly wanted to update folks on the federal legislation that we had mentioned before. We've been tracking the Families First Transition Act. We had mentioned that this was additional legislation to the Families First Act, and this was to help in the transition. We've been tracking it, and as part of the budget activity that has happened in Congress over the last several weeks, this legislation has moved forward, so we're excited about that. What essentially it provides is some bridge funding, so there isn't as much of a financial cliff for transition out of the waiver, provides it a little bit more additional time for planning that process, and does some improvements to the original legislation around expanding eligibility, expanding the criteria for the evidence-based practice programs that we are to implement. So I just wanted to give folks an update that has actually moved forward.
Great. Thank you. Ignacio?
Thank you. I just had one update, and it's in regards to our federal performance measures for the Department of Child Support Services. We're measured on key federal performance measures that the State Department of Child Support Services uses to evaluate how well we're doing and compares us to other county child support agencies. For the month of November, Santa Clara County DCSS ranked 24th, which makes us the highest performing large county child support agency in California. So I wanted to give kudos to our staff for all their hard work and commitment and making sure that they're following up and doing the work that they should be doing to ensure children are receiving the support that they're entitled to. It's a big accomplishment given that 5 years ago the department was ranking pretty consistently in the 40s out of 58 counties, and now we've made significant progress. So we'll continue to report out, and want to congratulate our staff for all their hard work.
Yeah, what was the number last year to this year?
I think we were in the high 30s, and then we made it up to 24. But 5 years ago, we were consistently in the 40s. So now we are the largest, or the highest performing largest county child support office in California, which is a big accomplishment. Thank you.
All right, that is our last item. Everybody have a great holiday season and new year, and we will see you back in January. Maybe some of you sooner than that. Thanks, everyone.